Handle this quietly, my CO said, sliding a folder across his desk. Inside was a sexual harassment complaint. Third one this year. All against the same VP. What do you mean, handle it quietly? I asked. I mean, make it go away. Talk to the employee. Offer her something. Transfer her to a different department. Whatever it takes. But this doesn't go on record. My name is Michael Brennan. I'm 41 years old. I was the HR director at Parkstone Financial in Charlotte, North Carolina. And I'd just been ordered to cover up sexual harassment. I said no. 1 week later, I was told my position was being eliminated due to organizational restructuring. But what they didn't know was that I'd documented everything. Every order to cover up. Every threat. Every timeline detail. And that documentation was about to prove this wasn't downsizing. It was retaliation. I'd been in human resources for 15 years. Started as a recruiter. Worked my way up to HR manager, then director. I'd handled hundreds of employee issues. Performance problems. Conflicts. Benefits questions. And yes, harassment complaints. Most of them were straightforward. Someone crossed a line. You investigated. You took action. You protected the employee and the company. That's how HR is supposed to work. But Parkstone Financial wasn't interested in how things were supposed to work. I joined Parkstone 3 years ago. A mid-sized financial services firm. About 400 employees. Wealth management, investment advisory, commercial lending. They'd hired me to modernize their HR practices, update policies, implement better systems, create a more professional culture. The CEO was Richard Parkstone, mid-50s, third-generation owner. The company had been in his family since his grandfather founded it in 1967. Richard was smart, driven, and completely focused on profit. Everything else was secondary. David Castellano was the senior VP of operations, early 40s, charming, connected. He'd brought in some of Parkstone's biggest clients. Richard loved him, called him the golden boy. The first harassment complaint about David came 6 months after I started. A junior analyst named Jessica reported that David had made inappropriate comments about her appearance, asked her to dinner multiple times after she declined, sent text messages late at night that had nothing to do with work. I followed protocol, interviewed Jessica, interviewed David, talked to witnesses. The evidence was clear. David had crossed professional boundaries. Nothing criminal, but definitely inappropriate. I recommended a written warning, mandatory training, and monitoring. Richard overruled me. David's going through a divorce. He's under stress. Let's give him some coaching and move on. No formal documentation. I pushed back. We need to document this. For legal protection. Legal protection means keeping this quiet. If word gets out that we're investigating executives, it creates problems. Handle it informally. Against my better judgment, I did. Verbal warning to David. No paper trail. Jessica was disappointed. But she didn't want to make waves. Said she just wanted it to stop. It did. For about 4 months. Then came complaint number 2. Different employee. Sarachin. Senior associate in the investment division. Similar pattern. Inappropriate comments. Unwanted attention. Text messages crossing professional lines. This time, I didn't ask Richard's permission. I opened a formal investigation. Documented everything. Interviewed witnesses. The evidence was even stronger. Multiple people had noticed David's behavior. The texts were worse. More explicit. More aggressive. I prepared a report. Recommended suspension pending further investigation. Possible termination if the behavior continued. Richard called me into his office the day I submitted the report. What the hell is this? He waved the document at me. A formal investigation. As required by our harassment policy. David brings in $12 million a year in revenue. $12 million. Do you understand what that means? I understand that we have a legal obligation to address harassment complaints. We have an obligation to protect this company. And that means protecting our top performers. Talk to Sarah. Offer her a transfer. A promotion. A bonus. Whatever makes this go away. Richard, that's not how this works. That's exactly how this works. We don't destroy careers over misunderstandings. This isn't a misunderstanding. There's a pattern here. This is the second complaint about David in 6 months. Richard's face hardened. There's no pattern. There are 2 isolated incidents that you're blowing out of proportion. Close this investigation. Transfer Sarah to a different department. And make sure this doesn't happen again. He meant make sure no one else complained. Not make sure David stopped harassing people. I transferred Sarah. She didn't want to fight it. Just wanted to move on. The formal investigation was closed. David received another verbal warning. No documentation. I started updating my resume that night. But I stayed. Partly because I needed the job. Partly because I kept thinking about Jessica and Sarah. About what would happen to the next woman David targeted if no one stood up. The third complaint came 4 months later. Amanda Rodriguez, marketing coordinator, 26 years old. She'd been with the company for 2 years. The complaint was detailed, specific, disturbing. David had cornered her in the break room, made explicit comments about her body, touched her waist. When she pulled away, he'd said, "Come on, don't be like that. I'm just being friendly." There were witnesses. 2 other employees had seen part of the interaction. Amanda was scared, crying in my office. "I don't want to cause problems. But I can't work here if this is going to keep happening." "This isn't your fault," I told her. "And you're right to report it. I'm going to handle this properly." I opened a formal investigation that afternoon. Interviewed Amanda. Interviewed the witnesses. Documented everything. Sent David a formal notice that he was being investigated and should not contact Amanda. Then I went to Richard's office. "We need to talk about David Castellano." Richard barely looked up from his computer. "Not this again." "Yes, this again." Third complaint. "This one involves unwanted physical contact." Witnesses. "We can't ignore this." "Michael, I thought we had an understanding." "We had an understanding that I'd handle things professionally. That's what I'm doing." Richard closed his laptop. Looked at me directly. "Let me be very clear. David Castellano is not going anywhere. He's too valuable. If you pursue this investigation, you're going to create problems for yourself." "Are you threatening me?" "I'm advising you. As a friend. You're a good HR director. But you need to understand business realities. Sometimes we have to make accommodations for top performers. Not when they're breaking the law." "He's not breaking the law. He's being friendly. Maybe a little too friendly. But that's not a crime. It's sexual harassment. And if we don't address it, we're liable. Handle this quietly." "That's an order." I stood up. "I can't do that." "Then maybe you're not the right fit for this company." I walked out. That conversation happened on a Thursday. By Tuesday, I had my termination letter. "Michael, thank you for coming in." Richard was in his office with Jennifer Walsh, the CFO, and someone from legal I'd never met. "We're making some difficult organizational changes," Richard began. "The company is restructuring, eliminating some redundant positions. Unfortunately, HR director is one of them." I looked at him. "You're eliminating the HR director position?" "We're consolidating HR functions. Moving to a leaner model. Your position is no longer necessary. This is because of the David Castellano investigation. This is because of budget constraints. You'll receive 8-week severance. Continued benefits through the end of the quarter. And we'll provide a neutral reference. I want this in writing. The reason for my termination. Organizational restructuring. It'll be in your termination letter." I signed nothing that day. Just collected the letter and left. At home, I pulled out everything I'd been documenting. Every email. Every meeting note. Every timeline detail. Monday, March 6th, Amanda files complaint. Tuesday, March 7th, I notify Richard and begin formal investigation. Wednesday, March 8th, Richard tells me to handle it quietly. Thursday, March 9th, I refuse and state I'm following proper protocol. Thursday, March 9th evening, Richard threatens my position. Tuesday, March 14th, I'm terminated for organizational restructuring. 7 days. From refusing to cover up harassment to being fired. 7 days. I called an employment attorney that afternoon. Her name was Patricia Morgan. She'd handled several whistleblower and retaliation cases. "Walk me through the timeline," she said. I did. Day by day. Hour by hour. Patricia took notes. When I finished, she looked up. "Michael, this is one of the clearest retaliation cases I've seen. The proximity between your refusal to cover up harassment and your termination is damning. They're saying it's budget cuts. Then we'll force them to prove it. In discovery, we'll get their financial records. If they're really downsizing, there should be evidence. Budget meetings. Financial projections. Multiple positions eliminated. Is your position being eliminated or just you?" "I don't know. We'll find out." Patricia filed a claim with the EEOC the following week. Retaliation for refusing to participate in covering up sexual harassment. Wrongful termination. Parkstone had 30 days to respond. Their response was predictable. Mr. Brennan was terminated as part of a legitimate business reorganization. His termination had nothing to do with any employee complaints or investigations. Discovery started 3 months later. Patricia subpoenaed everything: financial records, board meeting minutes, email communications between Richard and other executives, HR records for all employees. What we found was devastating for Parkstone's case. First, there was no evidence of financial distress. The company was profitable. Growing actually. Revenue was up 12% year over year. Second, no other positions were eliminated. Just mine. Some responsibilities were shifted to the CFO's assistant, but no major restructuring. Third, and most damning, emails between Richard and David the day after I was fired. Richard to David: problem solved. New HR person will be more cooperative. David to Richard: appreciate you handling that. Was getting worried. Patricia called me after reviewing the discovery documents. Michael, they're going to settle. These emails are smoking guns. They basically admitted in writing that they fired you for not covering up harassment. How much are we talking about? Significant. This isn't just wrongful termination. It's retaliation under federal law. You're entitled to back pay, front pay, emotional distress damages, and punitive damages. I'd estimate we're looking at $500,000 minimum, possibly more. The settlement offer came 2 weeks later. $450,000. Plus agreement that Parkstone would implement mandatory harassment training and establish an independent reporting system. They're also agreeing to report the David Castellano incidents to their insurance carrier, Patricia added. Which means he's going to face consequences finally. What about Amanda? Jessica? Sarah? I've reached out to all three. If they want to file their own complaints, we can help them. And the EEOC is opening a broader investigation into Parkstone's harassment policies. I settled for $450,000. After attorney fees and taxes, I netted about $280,000. But the money wasn't the point. 2 months after the settlement, I got a call from Amanda Rodriguez. Mr. Brennan, I wanted to thank you. I heard what happened. That you were fired for trying to help me. I'm so sorry. Don't apologize, Amanda. None of this is your fault. I filed my own complaint. With the EEOC. Your lawyer connected me with someone. I wanted you to know. Good. You deserve justice. So do you? Thank you for standing up. Most people wouldn't have. 6 months after my termination, David Castellano resigned. Parkstone's insurance carrier had gotten involved. Interviewed employees. The pattern of behavior was undeniable. They gave Richard an ultimatum: fire David or lose coverage. David left with a severance package. No admission of wrongdoing. But he was gone. Richard Parkstone remained CEO. But the company's reputation took a hit. The EEOC investigation became public. Several clients left. Recruiting became harder. As for me, I took some time off. Spent time with my wife and kids. Thought about what I wanted to do next. I could have stayed in HR. I was good at it. Had 15 years of experience. But I'd seen the dark side. The pressure to protect the company at all costs. The way employees became collateral damage when they threatened profit margins. Instead, I did something different. I became an HR consultant. But specifically for employees, not companies. I help people document harassment, navigate complaints, understand their rights. I work with attorneys to build cases. Some people call me a traitor to HR. They say I'm making it harder for companies to manage risk. I disagree. I'm making it harder for companies to ignore harassment. There's a difference. What happened at Parkstone wasn't unique. It happens everywhere. Employee reports harassment. HR is pressured to make it go away. The complaint gets buried. The harasser stays. The victim leaves or suffers in silence. And HR professionals who try to do the right thing? They get labeled difficult, or not a team player, or not understanding business realities. Richard Parkstone taught me something important. Companies don't care about doing right. They care about avoiding liability. And when those two things conflict, liability wins. Unless someone stands up, documents everything, refuses to participate. That's what I did. And yes, it cost me my job. But it also exposed a pattern of behavior that had hurt multiple women. It forced a company to implement real changes. And it showed other HR professionals that you can fight back. The 7-day timeline between refusing to cover up harassment and being fired? That became the centerpiece of my case. It was so blatant, so obvious that Parkstone couldn't defend it. They called it restructuring. The court called it retaliation. And that distinction? It was worth $450,000. But more importantly, it was worth knowing that I'd done the right thing. That I'd protected employees instead of protecting a harasser. That I'd followed the law even when my boss ordered me not to. Would I do it again? Absolutely. Because some things are more important than keeping your job. Like integrity. Like standing up for people who can't stand up for themselves. Like refusing to be part of a cover-up. Richard thought he could order me to make the problem disappear. Instead, I documented everything and made sure the truth came out. 7 days. That's all it took for them to show their hand. And that's all it took to build an unbeatable case. Handle this quietly, he said. I handled it correctly. And loudly. And in the end, that made all the difference.